Hello and welcome to this presentation from Pluralsight. My name is Andrew Mallett and I'm here as your instructor to help guide you through the Extending DNS to Host Zones module. So far on this course we've looked at DNS to resolve names, but as yet we haven't looked at hosting our own host name information, and that's what we're going to do in this module. As we run through, we'll be looking at how we add zones to our name.conf configuration. We'll be looking at creating forward lookup zones. So this is our normal zone information that has our address records, the MX records and the like. We'll also look at creating reverse lookup. So this then, well, as the name suggests, reverses the DNS process where we now resolve IP addresses to host names. And predominantly we'll be looking at having PTR records as our resource records within these zones. We'll see how we can generate resource records using the $generate directive. And of course we'll be looking at how we can test the zone information to make sure everything is up and running. So first off, what do we mean by a forward zone and how do we add it into the name.conf? Well, here we're going to look at adding in then a domain, example.com, and we're going to look at, first of all, editing the name.conf. And we're going to specify that we're adding a zone, so example.com. It's an internet zone, and then the brace brackets start defining information. So here we're going to set this up on our Ubuntu host, and this is going to host the master or read-write copies. Note at the end of the line we use the semicolon. We specify the file, so I'm going to call it db.example, but we could call it egg and chips if we really wanted to. But of course we have to make sure that we're pointing to the correct file. If I put a relative path, such as I've done here, then we're going to reference this file within the directory directive that's in our global options. Here we're adding in an option to allow update, and this is for dynamic DNS updates, which would come from a DHCP server. And we can put then an address range that is allowed to use or allowed to submit dynamic updates. Here it's set to none. We can add these within the zone here, the zone definition, or we can even put it in our global option so it becomes the default. And then of course I can close off my zone configuration. And again, note that we also have the semicolon after the closing brace brackets. A reverse zone is a little different. With a reverse zone, we're hosting reverse lookup information, so our PTR or pointer records. These then resolve IP addresses to host names. So the zone name is going to be a little bit different, and it really is the reverse of the IP address. So we're working on the 10.0.2 network, and this is a 24-bit network. So the network reverse would be 2.0.10. And that's really quite difficult to type because we're so used to or so programmed to type it in the forward way. The suffix is always then going to be in -addr.arpa. Again, it's an internet zone. They're pretty much the only zones that we deal with. Again, we're setting this up to a master, but when we look at setting up our slave server later, you'll see how this will differ. We can set up the DB, and I would normally set the DB with the network written the correct way round. But remember, this is just a file name, so it's not really that important. Obviously, the name we put in here, though, must match the name that we're going to store the records in. Again, a relative path is indicating that we're using the directory that is referenced in the directory directive. We're putting the same allow update none, and then of course closing this off. So I think we're just about ready to add some DNS configuration to our named.conf.